Let's continue with equations, lines. So the first chapter, I can't remember, I think we were more graphing lines. The second chapter, we were creating the equations. We were given the point and a slope, and later on we were given 2 points and had to come up with a slope, and then we had to create this equation. Now we're going to be comparing parallel and perpendicular equations and creating some more lines as well. So we have already done parallel and perpendicular, but just to keep in mind these words. So this one right here is parallel. Parallel. They're side by side. That's where they have the same slope. It's identical. This is perpendicular. It creates a 90-degree angle. Perpendicular. That's where it's the flipped. I don't know how to say this other than flipped and negative slopes. So the slopes are flipped from each other, and one's positive and one's negative. Coincidence, that is when you have the same slope and the same y-intercept, which remember we used as a letter B. And unrelated or not related, that's where we have different slopes. So if we ever have different slopes, we'll just say, hey, unrelated. Okay, so let's take a look here. For example number 1, write one parallel and one perpendicular to these slopes. So a parallel slope, well, that would just be -4. Whereas a flipped slope, remember this is going to be over 1. So I'll write that over 1. So when I do this, the perpendicular slope will flip it to 1/4, but we've also made it positive. Okay. Now, let's try again. Parallel slope. It's -1/3, so we'll keep it -1/3. Now, perpendicular, we're going to flip that to 3/1. But we're going to we don't need to write the 1, nor do we have to write the plus sign. So it's just a positive 3/1, which we just write as a positive 3. But you could write 3/1 if you wanted to. We should not write the plus sign because that's just given. So a parallel slope to 3/2, a parallel slope would just be 3/2. Perpendicular would be to flip it. And if it's not, it's a positive, so we'll make it a negative. So this one was a positive, the perpendicular was negative. Here was negative, the perpendicular was positive. So we flip the signs. Again here, parallel keeps it the same, -2/5. But we flip it here to be 5/2, and we keep it positive. From negative, we turn it to positive. So that is just a refresher for slopes, parallel and perpendicular slopes. So now what it wants us to do is which of these lines are parallel, perpendicular, coincident, which we just write CO, that just means that they're identical, or not related. So the first ones are going to be a little bit easier, and then the other ones are going to require some algebra, and we can try to figure it out that way. So let's take a look here. For here, my slope is 2, and here my slope is 2. So the slopes are the same, so we will circle, hey, these are parallel. So again, we're looking at the slopes. Here, the slopes are 4, and the slope is 4. So M is 4, and M is 4. So you think, oh, it's parallel. But that's when I noticed, well, hey, these are also identical. So my B is 5, and my B is 5. These are the exact same equations. So if that's the case, then it is identical. They're identical to each other. Where notice in here, my B's were different. These were not the same. 5 and negative 3. They're not the same. Okay. So here's my slopes. So my slope is negative 1/2, and this slope is 2 over, doesn't say, but it's over 1. They are flipped from each other, and one's positive, one's negative, so we can say they are definitely perpendicular. Okay. Here my m is 3 over 2. Here my m is 2 over 3. So they are flipped, but they're both positive. So that doesn't mean anything here. Are they the same? Nope. Are they flipped? One positive, one negative? Nope. So we say, hey, there's no relation here. They are not related. So yes, they are flipped, but they have to be flipped and negated from each other. One positive, one negative. And that is not the case here. So those are the 4 questions here. Now if we slide down, we see that we've got a couple more. Now these are not written in a way where I would know what to do. So for these ones, let's put a star here. Get the y alone. That's what we're going to do here. So I'm going to have to maybe separate this. We'll write 2x plus 5y minus 10 equals 0. And the bottom one here, 2x minus 5y plus 10 equals 0. So those are our 2 equations. Let's start on this left one here. We want to get the y alone. So I'm actually going to add this 10 over to the other side. So I have a 2x plus 5y equals 10. 0 plus 10 is 10. And then I got to move over this x. I'm going to subtract it over. Minus 2x. So 2x minus 2x are gone. So I have 5y. I can't combine these. I'm going to write the x first. So negative 2x. And then I have a positive 10. And then I will divide by 5, divide that by 5, and divide that by 5. So it's divide everything by 5. So y equals negative 2 over 5 x. Now 10 plus 5 is going to be 2. Okay. So we're going to get the hang of this. You want to get the y alone. The algebra here is not too complicated. You got to get rid of both things. So here I'm going to minus the 10. Minus the 10. 2x minus 5y. 0 minus 10 is going to be a minus 10, a negative 10. Then I will subtract the 2x. Now I can't combine the 10 and the 2 because they're not like terms. So minus 5y equals, I'll write the 2x first. I always write the x first, go in descending order. So the negative 2x and then the negative 10. And then I'll divide here by negative 5, divide everything by negative 5. So y equals, now the negatives cancel out to be a positive, and a 2 over 5x, and negative 10 divided by negative 5 is also a positive 2. Okay, so the question is, how are these slopes? What's happening here? So here, we have parallel slopes, we have perpendicular. So here my m is negative 2 over 5. Here my m is positive 2 over 5. Now those are not flipped from each, they're not the same, first of all. Second of all, they are not flipped of each other with negative, positive and negative. So it does have a positive and negative, but one of them would need to be flipped from the other. So there is no relation here. If it was negative 2 over 5 and positive 5 over 2, okay, now the fractions are flipped from each other. One's positive, one's negative. I can say, hey, they're perpendicular. And I do have the negative 2 over 5, but I don't have the positive 5 over 2. This one still has the same fraction. It's not actually flipped to the 5 over 2 that I would need for perpendicular. Okay, a lot of work there. So there's one more here. So we can start by separating this into kind of two areas. And let's write down 2x plus 5y minus 10 equals 0. So kind of the same numbers here. And then we've got a 5x minus 2y plus 10 equals 0. So I recognize these numbers, but let's try this again. So first thing I'm going to do here on the left one, I'm going to add the 10 over to the other side. So I've got 2x plus 5y on the left. 0 plus 10 is 10. Then I like to move over the 2x. So I can cancel those out. And now again, these aren't like terms, so I'll keep them separated. I'll put the x first. So negative 2x and then a plus 10. And lastly, I can divide by the 5, divide everything by 5. So I have y equals negative 2x with the 5. Now 10 over 5 is 2. Beautiful. Okay, let's try the second side over here. I'll do the same thing. I'll move over just the number first. So I have 5x minus 2y equals 0 minus 10 is going to be a negative 10. And then I'll move over the x. So those are gone. So I have a negative 2y equals, I'll write the x first, so a negative 5x and then a minus 10. And lastly, I will divide by negative 2. So y equals negative over negative is a positive, and then I've got a 5 over 2x. Negative 10 divided by negative 2 is also a positive 5. Now let's compare the slopes. So the slope of the one on the left here is negative 2 over 5. Okay. And the slope over here on the right is a positive 5 over 2. So one is positive, one is negative, and they are flipped from each other. So we can say that yes, these are perpendicular. They are flipped from each other, and one's positive and one's negative. So definitely a lot of work here. I will zoom out, but you can also look at the PDF of this. You have to do, 4 algebra here. So there was quite a bit going on.